I remember being in the 8th grade and telling her one time, "You have never said you've loved me. You never said it." And I was like, "Why can't you say it?" And here's what she told me. And this is one of those things where, like, you remember where you were when it happened. I will never forget. We were in the kitchen. She was like, this is before my youngest brother was born. She was like, it's because I like your older brother. I just don't like you. And that fucked me up so bad to, like, hear my mom say that. I had already knew it. I knew it, right? Because if she was having a bad day, like, she'd beat my ass and, or she would always, like, protect my brother and never protect me. So I had that underlying sense. And I mean, when I was a kid, I used to tell people, like, a mother doesn't like me. And so, but for her to actually say it, it just really, really put things into, like, a negative perspective. I ended up just not liking myself. I couldn't understand what it was about me that made me so unlikable by my mother. Mind you, I hadn't met my dad yet. He wasn't in the picture, but he only lived 5 minutes away from me. Wow. And I didn't know it because she hated him so bad she kept it a secret. But it's a small town. So one day after basketball practice, I had this guy on my team named Corey, and we had, like, real good chemistry. It was like Stockton and Malone. Like, I mean, I knew him. Like, and we were only, like, 11, 12 years old, but, like, we understood each other. And he was my friend, and we would always go play, like, after basketball practice. I go shoot hoops at his house. Well, his dad took me home one day. I still remember, like, the back of his dad's head. He had, like, a fade. And me and Corey were sitting in the back seat, and his dad was like, "Victor, who is your dad?" And I said, "I don't know. I never thought about it." And he said, "You need to go and ask your mother who your father is, and let me know the next time I see you." So I went home and I asked my mother, and I was so scared because I had always been told, like, do not ask me any questions about your dad. So, my brother's dad lived in Atlanta. He would come down and see him, but we were never allowed to talk about my father. That conversation was off limits, and I didn't know why. And so because I didn't know why, for a minute, I used to think, like, well, maybe he raped her or something, like, because no one would give me no one would explain to me why I was not allowed to talk to him and why my mother would always say, "I regret having you." So I ended up asking her, and she told me his name. She was like, his name is, and I remember she, like, walked, she didn't look me in the eye or anything. She just walked past me. It was almost like she just wanted to get this over with. And his last name, which is Watson, is the same last name as my friend Corey that I played basketball with, and his dad, Sean. And so in hindsight, I think, Uncle Sean, who I just saw for the 4th of July, and I was like, "Man, do you remember you were the one who told me about my dad?" He was like, "Yeah, I remember." I think from his perspective, he was like, it's time for him to know this, like, he needs to know who his father is. So I went back and told him, I was like, "Your brother's my dad, and this is my cousin and you're my uncle." And he was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "I'm going to bring him to the next basketball game." And so that's why I've always had, even though I stopped playing in high school, I always had like a special, like, relationship with basketball, because that was the first time, it was through basketball I met my dad, right? So it always has, like, that sentimental value with it. But yeah, at that game, I remember it was like the best game I played. I was showing out. I was, I had hit like 16 points. And then afterwards, my dad was standing at half court, and I met him. And I remember looking around for my mother, and she was nowhere to be found. It's that deep, deep shame, that deep shame. And that was the one time I saw him as a child. And so my mother used to always tell me, "Your dad just don't want to see you. That's why you never see him. He wants nothing to do with you." I learned 20 plus years later that, remember I was telling you about, like, triangulation, where you have one person tell person A this and person B that, and then y'all are beefed out, but then they still have a relationship with you. Well, that's what that's what was going on with me and my dad. I said, Dad, and I'll explain how I got to know him later. But I was like, Dad, my mother used to tell me all the time. I still have the text message. My mother used to tell me all the time that you wanted nothing to do with me. And he's a very quiet man. He's 70. He's stoic. But he was like, that is a lie. He wrote that in all caps. He was like, I have never said that. He was like, but your mother used to tell me you didn't want to see me. So here we were thinking something about one another that was the absolute furthest from true. And I was able to have a real meaningful conversation with him about his absence and how that has impacted me to this day. And to be able to come full circle and watch him this past July playing tic-tac-toe with my daughter literally just had me in tears,
Yeah.
But we couldn't get there unless I removed certain people. So let me go back to that.